You're now live, Chair.
Welcome to this meeting of the Economy and Growth Select Committee. I'm Councillor Edward Siddle, the Chair of the committee. I'd like to inform everyone present that the meeting is broadcast live to the internet via the Council's website and be capable of repeat. The image sound recording may be used for training purposes within the Council. In order to ensure that the meeting is managed effectively, can everyone please keep to the following guidelines for speaking? Council should only use the raised hand function when requesting to speak, and only speak when to do so by the chair. Please switch your cameras and microphones off when you're not speaking. Remember to set your mobile phone to silent during the meeting. Any views expressed by the speakers in the meeting are the view of the speaker's own. They do not necessarily reflect the views of the council. Please can councillors be aware that the webcast will continue to stream live for 20 seconds after the close of the meeting. This is due to a time delay in transmitting live. I can now confirm the remaining members of the committee. Vice Chair, Councillor Nev Clark, Councillor Dan Capper, Councillor Simon Evans, Councillor Paige Hacking, Councillor Ian Huddleston, Councillor Kev Kirkham, Councillor Chris Payne, Councillor Rachel Quinn, Councillor Peter Roberts, Councillor Jill Scott, and Councillor Kath Seisland. I'll now move on to agenda item number 1. And apologies for absence. As far as I'm known, unless I can see him online, I had one from Councillor Huddleston who's having a hip replacement, I believe, and we all wish him well and a quick and speedy recovery from that. Have you had any more, Rachel?
No more apologies, Chair.
So, agenda item number 2, to receive disclosable interest of any matters for the committee. No one's got any disclosable ones, so we'll move on to agenda item number 3. Has any matters been referred to the committee under the calling procedure?
No, Chair.
And to approve the minutes of the previous meetings on page 3 and 4. Has anyone got any comments on the minutes before I call for someone just to approve and second them for me? Okay. Would someone put their hand up and approve them for me? Councillor Evans and Councillor Clark has seconded them. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 5, the Select Committee Work Programme. The work programme is going to be worked on, and I believe what date did you say, Councillor McEwen, in the pre-meeting? I can't remember. Was it 22nd that we're having a Select Committee Work Programme meeting?
Yes, Chair, it is.
So what we're going to plan on doing is we're going to go through more of the items that are to be added to the committee, and we're going to look at what items need to go on in the next 12 months at that meeting with Councillor Payne and Councillor Quinn and the Vice Chairs, Councillor Nev Clark and everyone else at the meeting. So we're going to look at that at that meeting, and we'll bring back in September some more things that can go on the committee. But obviously the ongoing committee agenda will be revitalising Buxton, and obviously that's part of the Future High Street Fund. So that's going to be a big part of the meetings going forward because it's such a big project. But there will be other projects that we brought in and other pieces of work that we brought in every now and again. Has anyone got any comments on the work programme for me? Okay, no worries. Right, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the tourism update, and I'm going to pass to Lorraine Wright, our officer for that, and you're going to deliver a presentation on that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start sharing some slides that you should have them in your pack, but I'll share my screen and hopefully you'll be able to see them once they're up. We're just going live now, hopefully. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is a tourism update, tourism strategy update. There's quite a lot of information to get through, and there's certain areas that I'll probably focus on a little bit more than others, but we'll start going through the slides. We've got a variety of things to cover this evening. In terms of the tourism strategy, we've got a short update on the Tourism Partnership Forum, and then we've got some tourism headlines and data that we've included, a lot of which is some activity that's taken place through our UK Shared Prosperity funding. And then we've got some updates on business support and marketing activity, as well as the local visitor economy partnership. So I shall move on to the first item around the Tourism Partnership Forum. So this is linked to the tourism strategy, which was launched last year, at the beginning of last year, and effectively as part of that strategy, it envisaged having a tourism partnership forum that would look at having an action plan that would work with stakeholders and partners to deliver some key actions. And those types of areas that we'd look at developing an action plan would be around marketing, visitor management.
Lorraine, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. You're not currently displaying the presentation on full screen mode. You know, presentation. There's a chat message in the comments.
Okay.
In the chat. Bro, thank you.
That's it. Sorry, I don't see the chat coming up when I'm sharing my screen, so thank you. So in terms of the areas of focus that we would look at within that Tourism Partnership Forum and Action Plan, it would be around marketing, visitor management, capital and infrastructure developments, business support activity and new funding streams, etc. We are due to have our first meeting. We were somewhat hampered by an election announcement, so we were delayed in having our first meeting. So we'll get one after the summer period, get one in the calendar for just after the summer and get that underway with partners and partners that we'd work with for that action plan. We've already got terms of reference in draft that the group would sign off on, but again we'll bring future updates to this forum to keep you appraised of progress. Moving on to general tourism data, we have received some updates. This is national level because, as you'll see at the bottom of this slide, we don't actually get the high peak STEAM data, which is the Scarborough tourism data for our area, until later next month, I believe in August. That's awaited currently, but some feedback nationally that we've had from visitor economy colleagues is that in Q4 of last year, tourism day visits nationally had reached 282 million, which is an increase on the previous year. So again, there's considered to have been improvements in the last year in terms of the number of day visitors nationally. Average visitor spend or spend per visit was £44, which is up 6% compared to the previous year. That may well be impacted by inflation, and then there's a different levels of or different types of visitors. VFR is visiting friends and relatives, so a lot of you can see there are a lot of spend that falls into that category, and then visitor attractions coming next, and food, drink, hospitality, etc. Coming a close third. So again, when we get the STEAM data, we'll be happy to bring an update to the committee, because that will focus on high peak. It will talk about how much visitor spend there has been in the borough, and also how many overnight stays, etc., which we know has a bigger impact on the economy if people stay overnight rather than are just day visitors. And it also will give us breakdowns about what type of accommodation people are staying in, so can be really have some good insights into the visitors that we're getting locally. In terms of the Visit Peak District in Derbyshire website, again, quite a lot of traffic goes through that. Lots of views, 786,000 for the Q2 of the current year, which is a significant increase on the previous year. And a lot of that traffic is driven by walking content and events, so people looking for walks and also looking at what events are happening locally. So again, it's important that we can showcase some of our local information within those more regional platforms, etc. In terms of the High Peak pages within, we have some of our own web pages within the Visit Peak District of Derbyshire that come under that marketing umbrella. So there's, in terms of the January to March of this year, 66.3 thousand views or hits. And as you'll see on this slide, it highlights a number of businesses or pages that have been the most popular. So perhaps things on there are to be expected: Millennium Walkway, Pools Cavern, Solomon's Temple Walk, a number of different walks in there, Castleton Children's Walk and Heritage Walk. And also Exploring the Hope Valley by Bus Blog, again one of the most popular ones, which is, you know, quite good to see that people are looking at sustainable travel as well. And then some of the web pages and locations that have the most hits, again, maybe not a surprise in terms of which of those get the most hits, but just information that's good to see that people are using the web page and hopefully getting good, accurate information about what's available. In terms of social media engagement and what reach we have in terms of the High Peak activity, there's a number of followers, 250,000 followers. And then again, in terms of highlights and things that people are looking at and looking up, and the reach that they have, there's, you know, in some instances we're getting 1.2, a reach of 1.2 million, or only 500,000 up to over 1 million, which again is periods where people are looking at either a particular reason, which is English Tourism Week. It's not surprising that that's got the highest level of hits. And then within our web pages, there'll be a number of our businesses listed. Some of those will be paying members. So currently we have 59 businesses who are paying members, but 191 businesses who are listed. Now, next we're going to move on to some UK SPF updates around business support activity. So again, quite a lot of slides here in detail, so I won't focus on everything. I'll just draw out some of the highlights. But effectively, there's been activity around some workshops that we've held for businesses to attract and welcome walkers and cyclists. A number of those, 2 have taken place, and there were 2 further ones that were taking place in July. And also some workshops around how to build and maintain social media engagement for creators and makers. Again, hoping that that will help them to showcase what they can offer and also their businesses. And linked to that, there was a business toolkit that was developed that those businesses have got access to, and it's available on the website. There is a link here, so you should be able to access that link within your papers as well. So in a number of places we've included links that you can look up and look at afterwards, so that you can see the activity in more detail and the live information that's on those web pages. Other activity that we've got coming up or already underway, Chatsworth Country Fair, that's coming up at the end of August. So there'll be some funded stalls there, which will support some businesses in the costs of exhibiting. The other thing that I mentioned again about membership to the Visit Peak District in Derbyshire web pages. Through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we've been able to support 20 businesses to be listed and paying members. And up to date, we've got 11 businesses that have taken up that opportunity that are listed here in the bullet points. So quite a spread across the borough. But we are hoping, and we should be at a point where all of those 20 funded memberships will have been taken up by the end of the summer. And again, happy to keep providing updates on those as we move forward. Some more activity that's planned for the autumn time as we come out of the summer season, a Meet the Producer event, which is taking place in October, and will support at least 10 high peak businesses that are artisan food and drink producers. And that will again give them an opportunity to showcase what they're able to do and what they and it will be part of like a drinks reception and lunch, so they can showcase their work and be able to show that to other businesses across the borough. And then there's the Glossop Arts Trail towards the end of September, and that will be held during the High Peak Walking and Cycling Festival. And again, the opportunities within that will be to support High Peak creators and makers. And then some key marketing activity that's been taking place is around the Great Outdoors and Welcome to the Great Outdoors, showcasing Derbyshire's the High Peak and all it's got to offer. So there's some new walking content that's been commissioned for Whaley Bridge and Glossop, and again the business toolkit has some window stickers that are available that businesses can put in their windows. We also had arranged a webinar for businesses in the High Peak to understand how they can get involved, and also a media campaign that's started in July and will continue to run in the run up to the festival, which will be taking place towards the end of September. And towards that and the work that's been done, there's a number, 20 walks and 3 cycling routes confirmed to date. But all of those routes and events will be added onto the Visit Peak District and Derbyshire website. So that content around what's happening locally will continue to be kept up to date on their website. So hopefully attracting visitors to take part in those activities. There are key messages that underpin that activity and that marketing campaign around attracting people and showcasing the walking and cycling routes that we have to offer. Those key messages are around sustainable and responsible tourism, again, given the rural nature and the national park. It's really important that we encourage and remind people to be responsible when they're with us and whether they're visiting, and that again, in terms of sustainability, that focus and promotion of using public transport and travelling around the destination on public transport if possible. When we come on to some of the later slides, we talk about some of the work that's been done by some bloggers and social media influencers who've come and then done video reels and social media activity around their visit. They've all come and travelled via public transport. The other thing that we've focused on investing in as part of that funding is including content around a car-free itinerary, so walking and cycling routes that can be done from bus stops and train stations. And also literature that would focus on exploring by bus and including the details of key routes or bus the providers around peak sites here, etc., so that people are aware that they exist and then can work their itinerary or their preferences around those opportunities. The other thing to mention is around that marketing focuses a lot on lesser known areas, so not encouraging or not promoting some of the hotspot areas that we're already aware of, but actually encouraging people to other parts of the borough and to walks that they may not be as familiar with, and opportunities. And again, the timing of the Walking and Cycling Festival in the late September time is around trying to keep and promote tourism in that shoulder season, so post-summer, and getting people to travel and to do things in less busy times, which again is popular for walking, particularly with the weather sometimes more at that time of year, better for those types of outdoor activities, although it doesn't feel particularly like summer right now. And then walking and cycling trails, again, reminding people of the message, Peak District Proud Code and Countryside Code. So again, about being responsible in terms of litter, and dog owners, etc., and cleaning up after themselves and things like that. So very much a focus on that, being responsible. And there is Vision Peak District and Derbyshire do have a sustainable tourism action plan, and again, the focus about making sure that we look after our environment, and mindful of the impact of tourism activity can have on communities and businesses, but in a positive and negative way sometimes. One thing that's I've heard very recently is I think Vision Peak District and Derbyshire have very recently been awarded or got an award for sustainability award. I haven't got the full details of that yet, but again, happy to share. I think that's only been in the last couple of weeks that's been granted. But again, showing that they are focusing on, and the activity that they're doing with us as well is focusing on that kind of sustainability and environmental message. Now, some of the things that we've invested in as part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund has been these leaflets around different cycling and walking routes. So they're highlighting those opportunities, different walks that take place, but also they're encouraging people into the town. So there are activities that can be done on the edge of town and then bring people into the town centres afterwards. And again, as I said before, all of these, because they're local to town centres, they're all accessible and able to be done through public transport, so either via buses or train stations, and also by being close to towns, hopefully encourage people to avail of the facilities that our town centres have in terms of cafes and restaurants and things as well, and hopefully a lunch or after walk, place for people to go afterwards as well. And in terms of social media activity, so we've, as part of the UKSPF investment, there's been a real investment in terms of video reels and promoting our local towns. And as part of that, it's included within that was promoting or highlighting independent businesses and things to do within the towns. And they've been really popular on social media. Some of these have been on social media for quite a number of weeks now, and have really generated some really positive comments, both from local people and also businesses as well as visitors. So the reels have been produced. There's New Mills, Hayfield, Buxton, Glossop, Chapel and Whaley Bridge were to follow, which I think some of those have now been done more recently. And I've just, certainly I think the Whaley Bridge one we've included on the later slides has just been released at the time we were putting finalising the slides. So those are shared predominantly on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. And what I've done in these slides is include a link. Actually, I might need to change some of those links because you might not have been able to access some of those. If I'll check, because they may link to some council files as opposed to the Instagram ones, but if it need be I can recirculate them. But you can see on here some of them, like the New Mills one, for example, 686,000 views. That might have been that was one of the first ones that had been launched. Some of the Whaley Bridge one, for example, has said 28,000 views, but I think that had only, at the time we put that into the slides, it had only been released for 2 or 3 days, whereas the others had been out for maybe 5 or 6 weeks. So in terms of the number of views and people engaging with those posts, they will have increased significantly since these slides were prepared. Oh, so here we go, the Buxton. That they're on this slide here. So it's got the Instagram link here. So on these ones, you should be able to link straight into those videos on those websites, and watch those videos, and see what the various different reels and influencers have shared and where they've promoted. And then a summary of some of that activity in terms of how it's broken down. So some of the key towns, so social media post breakdown. So again, some of these will be quite a lot lower because they were only, like Whaley Bridge, for example, had only just been launched at the time we were doing these slides. But you can see from those who've been available, the longest, like New Mills, has reached 1.6 million people through various different networks that have been shared by a variety of different partners and agencies. And that's resulted in 15,000 people engaging with those posts. So again, it shows the power, I suppose, that social media can have in terms of the reach, and a lot of people do follow social media activity in terms of, as part of their tourism and preparation for visiting places and seeing what's available locally. And then a couple of other activities that are around more press related and blogger. A variety of different people who'd come to visit. So one lady had come who's a leading accessibility blogger, so promoting accessible breaks in the Peak District. We also had the Great British Dog Walk. So again, a lot of visitors who are walkers are coming with dogs as well. And again, that promotion around it, being responsible, but also the walks that will be more suitable for people who are coming with dogs. And then Soft Girls Who Hike, again, really appealing to women and getting females out there on some of these great walks, and in group activity as well, and again promoting car-free walks. And then as well, there was some activity within the Sunday Times, which was promoting the Walking and Cycling Festival, and as well as some activity that will be taking place around High Peak and autumn short breaks. And then there's a couple more still to come, which I think were due to be filmed during July, which was Triggs and Teeth and Coco Travels, which again, we can share those when they're available. But again, some key bloggers that are active in the travel and walking environments and on social media. So we'll share that activity when we've got them and they're finalised. And then the last couple of slides, the Local Visitor Economy Partnership. I think when we last had a tourism update, it was probably towards the beginning of the year. The LVEP had been launched or announced that there would be one. There was a workshop that was held back in May that Claire Brooks, in our tourism lead, attended. And there are key areas of focus. There will be a destination management plan developed for the LVEP area. So this is a very much a regional activity beyond the boundaries of the High Peak. But that will be looking at leadership, partnerships, so how we work together, business development, again, how we support our tourism businesses, infrastructure and investment. Again, we've highlighted before, and we've talked about it in this forum, the importance of use of public transport and promoting that, and sometimes the challenges in terms of some of that local connectivity that is really important from a tourism perspective as well, particularly around sustainability and climate. Product development, sustainability, quality and accessibility, and then finally skills. So making sure that we've got the right skills to support the the growth of the industry, or the industry as it develops, and making sure that we've got jobs for local people, and therefore the skills package supports that. And we'll also share the destination management plan as it's developed, or certainly when there's a draft plan to share. It does say on here that it's planning to be launched in the autumn. And the purpose of the destination management plan is, the desire is to help guarantee a long-term positive outcome for Derbyshire, ensure competitiveness, so a strong investment and tourism product to satisfy both visitors and residents, but also a framework for future sustainable development of the area as a destination. So it's really important that as part of that, we make sure that through our tourism strategy in the Tourism Partnership Forum and Action Plan, that we look at ways to support that supports our district in terms of its growth, but at the same time being mindful of those challenges and key factors that are important around sustainability and the general environment. I think that is now the last slide. So I'm happy to take any discussion or comments, Chair. So I'll stop sharing for now so I can see the screen and see everybody's faces.
Yeah, we've got Councillor Hacking, and then Councillor Scott, and then Councillor Quinn, and then Councillor Todd. So I'm going to bring in Paige first, please.
Hi, I really enjoyed that presentation. Thank you, Lorraine. And I just want to say, in terms of the lesser known villages and towns, and I know it's tourism, but I was wondering whether there was a missed opportunity for links to the Move More strategy, in terms of getting our own residents moving and walking to different parts of the borough, and encouraging some spending in different areas and things.
Okay.
So, yeah, and it just seems that sometimes the strategies can be a tiny bit fragmented from each other, and there might be like opportunities to bring it all together on how what we're doing in one area on one strategy might actually help with another strategy we've got going on. So I was wondering whether we could maybe have a slide in future presentations that just have how this links to our other strategies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We'll pick that up with colleagues as well internally, and make sure that we're all sharing that information with each other in terms of activity that's taking place. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Paige. Councillor Scott, Jill, do you want to come in?
Oops, where am I? Yeah, thanks, Chair. I really enjoyed that, Lorraine. Sorry. I think it's great, the emphasis on car-free travel and buses and public transport. It's absolutely brilliant, and all the literature that's being produced. Question about kind of literature, is some of it like paper literature, hard copy literature, leaflets?
Yes, some of it is and will be, and a lot of it will be things that are shared online and on social media. So to some degree, some of it will be produced on paper, but though the decisions around what to produce and how much is always again being mindful that about the environment, and not just producing things for the sake of producing it, but it's more about having some of those leaflets available, or at least that you can scan a QR code at least
Yeah.
from it and then download it. So it's in that digital context that the number of any paper copies would be very limited in that sense, more
Yeah.
just to have some in key locations.
I don't know if this is too complicated, but in terms of QR codes, is it possible? It is possible, isn't it, to do a QR code which links you to like bus timetables and things? Have you thought about doing that so people have actually got access to the timetables as well? I know there's people that do it. I know the
Yeah,
cost of gas,
Yeah.
active travel, they do it.
Yes, there is, and obviously bus providers and things will often have them on bus stops where you can,
Yeah.
where you can scan the code. I'm not aware that any of the leaflets have got that in them, but certainly it's something that we can take away and consider for any sort of future activity.
Yeah, and sorry, still on the same kind of thing about kind of where the information is going. Is it going out into like Manchester, the whole of the East Midlands, into Sheffield? Are you sending this information kind of beyond the immediate area? Because a lot of people come in, from
Yes.
Manchester and Sheffield and
Yeah, so
Nottingham.
through the wider local visitor economy, that would, and the Visit Peak District in Derbyshire obviously will attract a lot of traffic through their website for people who are more of a regional and national and international basis. But certainly we're sharing that through all of our social media channels, and they're sharing it through their social media channels. So it is reaching those wider areas, and we've also got an LVEP as well on the Stoke and Staffordshire side. So again, there's activity working between and the Peak District National Park in the middle, making sure that there's an element of those things being joined up as well, and that information can be cascaded across wider platforms.
Yeah, I think it's great. And just one last point, sorry, Chair. I was really pleased to see there were a couple of cafes in New Mills who are part of the businesses that are kind of taking part, because particularly one of them, they're really affordable cafes, because I think that's a very important thing that, sometimes people come and there's some great food available, but it's actually really expensive. But a couple of those cafes are actually quite affordable for families, which I think is very important because we want all sorts of people to come. So that's great. But I think it's brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Quinn, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, thanks. Just a few questions really for well, we've discussed them before, but also I'd like them brought in the future. First of all, do we have any information in terms of people when they're staying over, whether they're staying in holiday cottages, Airbnb, or in hotels? And do we have a strategy to try and move people away from holiday cottages because of the impact on house prices and local residents, and to expand the hotel capacity in the area? So that's one thing, which I think is really important, because when you look at tourist areas, for example, Cornwall in this country, and of course there have been all the demonstrations and protests in various places around Europe about the impact of tourism on local people. And I really think if we're going to talk about sustainability, we need to be looking at where people are staying and the impact on local residents. So I'd like to see us do a bit of work on that, and also have a strand where we try and boost hotel accommodation rather than people living in houses that could be lived in by local people. Second thing, we did say before we were going to have a look at wages in tourism, and I'd like to see some analysis about whether those wages are sufficient to enable people to live, to access housing, etc. in the area, because it's not much use having jobs in tourism if they're not enabling people to live. And we've got to look at how people in in the local area are living. And lastly, we did look at comparisons. We said we were going to compare High Peak to other areas and how they manage tourism, for example, areas like Cornwall. And I wondered where we'd gone with that, if we'd actually managed to do it. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you. So a couple of things to come back on. In terms of overnight stays, the STEAM data does break down into types of stay. So it generally breaks it down into serviced accommodation and non-serviced accommodation. So serviced accommodation would be hotels and B&Bs, and non-serviced accommodation would be more your Airbnb and your cottage, where you generally would stay for longer, so you're not getting that breakfast generally, and you're not getting kind of daily checks and cleans into the room, which you'd get in a hotel. So it does break it down into those different types, and it also does bed spaces, I think, in both of those types. So we would, when we get the STEAM data, that certainly is something that we would look at and be able to monitor in terms of, are the number of bed spaces increasing in one type of accommodation compared to the other, in serviced or non-serviced, and also what people's preferences are. I think it's fair to say that COVID changed some of those preferences, because for a period of time you could holiday in cottages and non-serviced accommodation when it was less easy to maybe holiday in hotels because of the social distancing arrangements. So I think in some ways that did change some habits. So it will be interesting to see whether, as we move away from the COVID period, whether some of those, whether people's routines have changed back into sort of more hotel type accommodation. But that is something we can look at when we get the data. In terms of wages in tourism, we get various different data around types of jobs and how many jobs are in different activities or different sectors, as for example. But that's perhaps something that we could pick up and have a look at through the tourism partnership forums. We can look at, when that's up and running, what extra data we might like, or what extra analysis that we could do. And again, as you say, about making sure that the jobs in those areas are sufficient to allow people to kind of have an acceptable, a good standard of living, and be able to afford to live locally. And equally, I think that's an action that we could look at with our LVET partners when we talk about comparing ourselves to other areas. We've come up in discussion, we've talked about similarities perhaps with certain areas around a big kind of national park. So some parts of North Yorkshire, as an example, would be very similar to in terms of the High Peak comparison. Or Calderdale, as an example, again, lots of market type towns, and lots of kind of walks, rural activity. But I think that's something, again, we could work with our tourism partners to see where we would correspond and correlate to. And there's also the option to do that activity through the LGA. But I think we're specifically here talking about not just councils of a similar size. We're actually talking about us being quite a tourist hotspot, and how we would correspond, which might derive a slightly different outcome to asking the LGA where we comply with, in terms of sort of councils of a similar size and nature. So I think that, again, something that we perhaps could look at as part of the Tourism Partnership Forum and those wider partnerships with the LVEP, and see if there's good comparisons that we can draw. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, just struggling getting off mute there. I've got Councillor Todd and then Councillor Sizeland.
Yeah, so, thanks. It's just a quick question. I just wondered if the Countryside Code is emphasising that people shouldn't be using disposable barbecues and starting fires and this kind of thing, because obviously that's very important in our area.
Yes, it does, I believe. I think it's got, I can't remember specifically the different categories, but I'm sure that there's reference to litter, taking your litter away, the dogs and dog fouling, and barbecues and things like that, about not using barbecues whatsoever in those types of destinations because of fires and risks of fire. So yeah, I'm 99% sure that that is the case, but we will check just to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sizeland.
Yeah, I I had a look at the Peak District, Visit Peak District chapel site, and to be honest, I wasn't very impressed. I think they could do with our we've got a great walk leaflet, so I think that would be good if it could go on that site. I'm happy to go out with them and show them what chapel has got, you know, if that helps. But I did think it could do with a bit of an overhaul, to be honest. The other thing I don't understand was we've got a couple of cafes in chapel that have got bronze membership, but what do they get for that?
The membership was that we were funding their membership to the Visit Peak District and Derbyshire website, so that they become a kind of affiliated business on that website, so they're a member of it as opposed to just a business that's referenced. So they'll get like you would with being, say, a member of the Chamber of Commerce or something. There'll be things that you can participate in that's specifically supporting tourism activity, so workshops and things like that they'd be entitled to. I'd have to look at the specifics of what a bronze membership entitles them to as opposed to a silver or a gold, but what the funding supported them with was to that bronze level membership, which will give them an opportunity for their business to, you know, be showcased within those tourism pages.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the video, and I'll share that around on Facebook. But chapel's not been done yet, has it? Well, I can't find it, let's put it that way, on the Visit Peak District site.
It may well have been done, but not edited. So I know some of them were being filmed in July. So I think the Whaley Bridge one has only just been done a few weeks ago. And just at the time I was doing these slides, but there was still a couple more. But I think they were intending to do the actual visits and the reels during July. So they will be imminent.
Okay. Yeah, because I've looked at some of the others and they are good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Damien's just shared on the chat what's included in a bronze package, which would have been £250 per annum. So they've saved that fee because we've paid for that through Shared Prosperity Fund. But it'll include things like a link to their website. They can put some business images up there. They can put a description of their business. So again, it gives them a platform, I suppose, that you will get a much wider audience and a national audience on the website.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
How many of these memberships have we got left for Visit Peak District bronze memberships? Do we know?
It's in the slides we said that there were 11 signed up, there were 9 available, but we expected all of those to have been filled by the end of July, which is next week. So it may well be that in the last 3 weeks or 2 weeks since we did these slides that more businesses have signed up to that, so I can get an update.
How do they apply for it? Who do the email?
We we've promoted it through in all of our activities and conversations with tourism businesses. They are aware of that opportunity, so we've already approached tourism businesses. So it would be through the UK Shared Prosperity email addresses that if they wanted to get in touch, if they haven't already signed up for that. What I can do in the meantime, it's probably best if I find out if there's any available, so we don't promote it to businesses and then find that all 20 are in the process of now being finalised. So I can find that out quickly, hopefully tomorrow.
Brilliant. Will you let me know, because there's quite a good, there's one business I think would be really suitable for it in the Glossop area, and they're right in the heart of Glossop, so I think it'd be really good if we could get them involved.
Okay.
And they're really good business, and local people work for them as well. I was speaking to Peak Tours. I don't know if you've heard of them, Lorraine. They're based in Hadfield. My daughter's in the same class as one of the members of staff's sons. So I was having a chat with him about working in the Peak District. They do mainly tours outside of the High Peak, but they are based in Hadfield I think it's in Jill's ward, or Jill Cross's ward, and I just wondered if we could reach out to them and get them involved with the tourism strategy, maybe try and encourage them to do some tours of the High Peak and Peak District, because they do cycling tours, and they may be interested in doing some work in the area and promoting the area that they live in, because obviously they're locally based and all live in the Hadfield or Glossopdale area. So I was wondering if you could give me some contact details, or whether I pass your contact details on to them, Lorraine, and they get in touch with you.
Yeah, we can make contact. I'll check, because it may well be that we've had some contact with them through the tourism activity. I'd be surprised if we hadn't, but I'll certainly check.
Yeah, definitely worth it. But yeah, it's really good presentation again. Some really good points. I mean, like Paige's point about the Move More strategy, I think that's really important to try and encourage people in the area when they're going to different areas of the High Peak, because technically we even though we're a small area, people may travel from one area to the other to do tourist activities, such as people from Glossop going to Buxton to the theatre, or going to there and looking at ways we can get there, and obviously people coming to Glossop for events like the Glossfest that was funded through the Shared Prosperity last year, and obviously the Heritage Weekend. Sorry, I'm pointing out events that I do, unfortunately, but there's other things like the Carnival in Glossop, and there's New Mills Carnival, and other places where people will go, and obviously there's the tours as well that people will look at. So there's plenty of places that people will travel for a day out and act as tourists within the High Peak. So I think Move More is really good, and working with that Helen Thornhill is doing the Glossop one would be a really good way of merging the strategies together. So thanks for that point, Paige. Has anyone else got any further points that they would like to add?
I've just shared a link, hopefully it's come through on the chat, to the Countryside Code, which does list about litter and not using barbecues, but I've just put a link into the chat, so it's there.
Brilliant. There's another one as well that we've also got business newsletter as well, haven't we, that we can
Yes.
get business to sign up to. So if anyone's a business owner and they're watching the live broadcast, make sure you sign up to that on our website. Councillor Hacking, Paige, you want to come in again?
Yeah. I've just got two more questions. The first one was: is there any way of checking whether the social media and the reels, how they actually translate into bookings and uptake, like how effective they are, other than their reach? Is there any way of like monitoring whether it's the reel that's brought people in or made them book?
I suppose the only way to do that would be through a more of an evaluative process, where you'd ask people what had prompted them to, so kind of a survey that said what had brought them there. I think the reality is, because of the reels people may look at a reel that's been done about a particular walk and then decide to come, but then they do everything potentially independently, where they just find a hotel that they want to stay in nearby, and actually there's no, from an internet or website point of view, there's nothing that necessarily closes that loop. So so the only way would be through probably more survey-based activity, where we're asking visitors why or what's attracted them to the area. Is there something specific that you know has brought them to the area? And often it can be things like, you know, TV shows or films where if they're filmed in the area and things like that. And again, you wouldn't necessarily know the impact that that's had, but unless you do it through that type of questionnaire based activity.
Yeah, thank you. And the second question was about just following up from an earlier committee meeting that we had, where I mentioned about the Derbyshire's cultural framework and the idea they had about making markets for creators and makers, and whether we looked into the potential to borrow that idea, because I'm assuming they're not doing that anymore.
We can have a look at that. I don't think, was that on this committee or was it on a different one?
I
I'm
think
not
it was
sure
on
I recall. Or was it?
I think it was this committee. It'll either be this committee. I think it was last time we were talking about the growth strategy.
Right.
I briefly mentioned it about the Derbyshire's cultural framework, and they had the idea of using the marketplace to revitalise the marketplaces because they feel that they are not as vibrant as they used to be. But I don't know whether that's still a viable option. But yeah.
Okay, I'll make a note of that, because it's certainly something that any activity that is within a town centre that will either appeal to whether it's local people or tourists is obviously of benefit. And when we invest in the town centre in Buxton, again, there's opportunities there perhaps to do sort of activities like that. But certainly we, as part of this activity, we are making more contact and building up those contacts with creators and makers, whether it's of food or more artisan and craft type activities. So it certainly may be something that happens naturally, but something that we can look at as part of that tourism strategy and actions moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McEwen.
Thanks, Jed. Just on Paige's particular point, we're hoping that it's something, as we're moving on to the next stage of developing the cultural strategy, that we'll be able to pick up some of the strands from the Derbyshire framework. We're not quite ready for moving on to that next bit yet, but we're hopefully just getting together the last couple of people to sort of make sure we've got the advisory group ready, and then we can move on to starting on the strategy itself, and hopefully we'll be able to include that as one of the strands. So potentially sort of, are there links that we can explore that can make sure that for some bits of culture we can try and make, well, not necessarily us making the money out of it, but we can try and provide some opportunities for folk to be able to make money out of it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there's no further comments on that, I'm going to ask Lorraine to move on to the next presentation. I've just lost the agenda because I'm looking at your presentation. So that will be refreshing the growth strategy. So we'll move straight on. Lorraine's going to put some slides on again. I think they're in the pack, and we'll go through them, and any questions at the end, I think. Is that best, Lorraine?
That's fine. I don't mind. I'll share my screen and let me know when you can see it, and then I'll put it onto full screen mode. Is that working now?
It's on the screen. It's just not in the presentation mode yet, but it might have a
I'll-
delay on it.
I'll do that now. It doesn't allow me to do it until I've already shared it. So there we go. That should be done now. So the growth strategy. So we've got on here tonight, we're looking at a variety of different themes, some of which we've talked about before, but linking it back really, I suppose the starting point is that we've got the borough plan, which has got aims and objectives in there, and then moving on to looking at some of the different growth strategy themes. So around businesses, people and skills, tourism, which we've talked a lot about this evening, town centres and high streets, and then planning and the local plan, which is obviously quite heavily, quite closely linked in terms of enabling all of that activity around growth, is making sure that we've got the right sites allocated within the local plan, and that the planning policies, etc., that wrap around our policies and procedures are supportive of that growth activity and economic prosperity of the borough. So starting back at the borough plan, which is now, was published last year. So the main aim that links to the growth strategy is around protecting and creating jobs, supporting economic growth, development and regeneration. So that's the kind of key underlying aim that we would focus on as part of the growth strategy. And then within the borough plan, it talks about some of the key objectives that link to that key aim. So the main objectives for this plan period are around encouraging business growth, which includes startups and enterprises, working to support existing local businesses, both large and small, as they respond to future challenges, supporting the development of innovative green jobs and businesses across the High Peak, promoting tourism to maximise local benefit, and working to create flourishing town centres and thriving high streets to support the local economy. And then the last two, as again I said, more kind of enabling around maintaining and delivering an effective local plan, high quality development and building control with an open for business approach. Now the last two are very much within the purview of Ben Haywood, who's the head of planning, but it's obvious that when we look at regeneration and economic growth and prosperity, that as services we work really quite closely together in terms of making sure that we try and support our planning colleagues in bringing forward sites that are allocated and trying to unlock and facilitate and enable as a regeneration service, bringing sites forward that might be complicated, etc. So that we work quite closely together with planning, which is why it's important to keep those two bullet points on the bottom, even though they technically sit within another service area. So over the next few slides, we break these down into some themes and what are we currently doing, as well as what we could maybe do in the future as we look to revise and refresh our growth strategy. So in terms of what we're doing currently for business, we've got quite a significant chunk of the UK shared prosperity money is around business support, a mixture of capital and revenue, but as you'll see on there, predominantly revenue. And we've got a variety of ways in which we are supporting businesses through grants, providing information, advice and guidance, supporting new businesses to set up, and growth of existing businesses. So, for example, new business development under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, Vision Derbyshire are in place to support activity with new businesses, and in terms of growth of existing businesses as the High Peak Accelerator. So there's lots of activity that's been put in place to support our local businesses in terms of that new startup and growth of businesses. And also linked to that is looking at and trying to enhance the data collection that we've got for our businesses at district, borough and at town level. And also we've got the Peak District Partnership. So again, lobbying for rural businesses, particularly as we move as well into the mayoral combined authority, making sure that, you know, that rural businesses and communities are at the forefront, because of basically being able to achieve that funding and support for those types of businesses as we progress through that. In terms of what we can do moving forward, some of the areas, and we've touched a little bit on skills previously, but that collaboration with county and with skills providers to make sure that the training that's on offer supports the future business growth. So really understanding our businesses and what their needs are and what their future aspirations are, and what their development needs are in terms of training and development as they evolve and in a changing environment. The other thing really is about understanding our local businesses, our existing Indigenous businesses, understanding their challenges, their opportunities for growth and their spatial requirements. So again, linking that to the local plan in terms of what are their needs, what are their plans for the future? Are they outgrowing the space that they're in? Are they wanting to move to a different location, etc.? We could look at, certainly for our key businesses or sectors, looking at a key account management. So again, really understanding those opportunities really for those sectors or businesses to grow, and having a point of contact for them that they could get in touch with. And also developing programs of business support that would support them to grow and evolve in the future. So by having that stronger rapport and relationship with them, being able to tailor funding programs to them as they become available, and being able to support them to access that funding. And also collaborating with our other county council colleagues, and in terms of overlap. So sometimes businesses might have outlets in different locations, or there's a sector overlap. So really understanding with our other county council colleagues that if there is that overlap and the challenges that are being experienced with other businesses in the wider area. And then the other thing around inward investment is specifically about attracting new business. So on a kind of regional, national or international. So generally when the term inward investment's used, it is about attracting new business in, and it's usually on that much wider geography of a regional, national or international. We don't get a huge amount of inquiries. They tend to get filtered through county colleagues who would then approach us if there is an investor looking for a particular location or type of space. And I'm not sure whether there was a potential talk about whether some of this activity would or wouldn't sit with the combined authority in the future. But generally, we don't get a huge amount of inquiries for new businesses wanting to locate. And the ones that are looking at relocating into the Derbyshire area are often looking for space that and the size of site that we just can't accommodate within the High Peak area, because they're looking for sometimes very large sites that we just don't have. But again, we work closely with those county colleagues if those inquiries do come in. But the focus generally of the regeneration team's time is more about existing businesses, and if they're looking to expand or move or relocate within the High Peak itself. And then again, as I've just mentioned about MCA, is exploring as opportunities become clearer as we move forward, the different funding streams that will be coming through the mayor in terms of business support, etc. And moving that, being able to respond to those opportunities for our businesses and cascade that information to them, for them to apply or for us to support them to apply. So moving on to the theme of people and skills, again, we currently have some funding through UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is all revenue money, which relates to skills. And that's split into 4 different categories. So we've got employment support for economically inactive people. And then we've also got work-based skills, investment in those areas, which is around for local areas to fund local skills needs. So linking back to that, what, you know, where are the jobs available, what are the jobs in, and are there skills gaps that we need to fill to support local people to secure those jobs. Green skills, again, an area of high focus currently in terms of lots of businesses wanting to be greener, but also in bringing those skills on board for staff to apply for jobs. And then finally, again, not surprisingly, digital skills. So supporting people to develop their digital skills to be able to better place them for job opportunities and to develop further. And then finally, there are, we do get involved in regional employment and skills meetings. So again, working across the regional platform of understanding what some of those skills challenges and opportunities are, as well as where there may well be funding coming forward. So again, important that we engage in that activity. In terms of things that we could look at moving forward around people and skills, some key areas of activity will be understanding that skills gap. So linked to the business activity is really understanding where businesses feel there is a gap in skills and making sure that their requirements are understood, and that can be fed into activity with and collaboration with the county colleagues and skills providers to make sure that the training and development opportunities will support that future business growth, and also opportunities for people to gain higher level qualifications, so to move through that kind of qualification ladder to be able to become more qualified and progress in their employment. But also it's really important to grow the local skill base and also to retain skilled workers. So, you know, we've touched on, you know, affordability earlier on in the tourism presentation, and, you know, do tourism jobs pay enough to enable people, you know, who are local to live here and live, you know, be able to afford to rent and to live comfortably. We know from the data that there are a lot of younger people moving out of area in the kind of 20s and 30s age bracket, often because they're looking for higher paid jobs or more skilled jobs, and potentially as well because of affordability of accommodation. So really looking at how we can marry those things together in terms of higher paid jobs, upskilling and continuing the skilled retention of those skilled workers so they can stay within the borough and remain employed and access to those jobs without having to either commute out or to move out of area for potentially cheaper accommodation. And then the other thing just to mention here is something that will be happening through the EMCA is there will be the devolution deal includes the adult skills funding, and will move to EMCA from the academic year 2025 to 26. So again, making sure that that funding is we've an opportunity within the High Peak to make sure that our local people and adults within our area are accessing and able to access that funding when it's on a been managed on a more regional and mayoral combined authority platform. And then I won't dwell too much because we've done a lot on tourism tonight, but in terms of what we're currently doing, we've had nearly an hour talking about all of the activity, but just in terms of some of the financial elements, in terms of promotion of wider campaigns, there was £85,000 allocated to that. So there's a lot of activity, and we've already talked about it in terms of the walking and cycling festival, the promotional material, the town reels, promotion of car-free travel and sustainable travel, and then promotion of the visitor economy. So that kind of focus on developing the website and the content within the website, supporting the businesses through the business toolkit, and again the focus on meeting the producer events, so our businesses being able to showcase what they've got to offer. So again, a lot of activity through that's been really successful to date through the Tourism UKSPF money. In terms of moving forward, and some of this, we've talked about some extra actions as well, but we certainly need to look at, analyse and really understand some of the insights from the STEAM data when it comes out. So the data we will get in August will be for 2023. What we are hearing in terms of 2024 activity for this current year is that there has been an impact due to the cost of living crisis. So we're hearing that a lot of people maybe historically would often book their holidays 5-6 months in advance, so they made sure they knew where they were going, and they'd start to pay for that in advance, when they booked some of that accommodation. Now it's the feedback that we're getting is often people are leaving it more to the last minute, A, because they're looking to see what the weather's going to be like, and B, they're looking to make sure that they can afford it, so making sure that they've settled all of their other bills and commitments and then booking something for a shorter period of time. And again, unfortunately, that we'll probably start to see the impact of that in the figures that we receive next year. But again, it's just something to be mindful of, and as Councillor Scott had said earlier, it is really important that we promote things that are affordable, and particularly making sure that there's opportunities for everybody to be able to engage with the great outdoors and some of the tourism things that we've got to offer, but there's something available at every kind of price point and to meet every and a variety of different kind of financial means. The other things that we will be involved in moving forward and be able to hopefully to contribute to meaningfully is around the LVEP, so the Local Visitor Economy Partnership, and being active participants in that and hopefully benefit from that as it works across quite a wider regional platform, and making sure that what we have to offer is well showcased within the websites, etc., that we've got access to. The destination management plan that is being developed as part of that LVEP, again making sure that that meets our needs, but also again I think we've all highlighted the importance around sustainability and being responsible tourists, and making sure that anything that is promoted will have a positive impact on residents and visitors, whether it's in terms of, you know, employment, etc. For local visitors, it's not got a negative impact on them and their lives. And then on a more local level, the Tourism Partnership Forum will look at developing actions and an action plan that will support that delivery of our tourism strategy, and look at our partners and how they can support that delivery and support those priorities. So that will start to happen when we have that first meeting and really crystallise what some of those key actions will be. And then the other thing, as part of all of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, there will be an evaluation process. So looking at what some of the impact of that investment has been. So no, Councillor Hacking had said earlier about how will we know whether a reel has contributed to, you know, lots of people come into our area. That might not be as simple to do, but certainly we'll be able to looking back at and through survey type material as well, but also looking at what the impact on the investment has been. So in terms of how much people have spent when they come, how long they've stayed for, what the economic impact of the spend generally. So there will be evaluation activity that will take place as part of that, and like average spend and things like that, and whether that's increased over time. So we'll move on to town centres and high streets. So again, a lot of activity happening in terms of some of our key towns. So the Revitalising Buxton, we've talked a lot about the Heritage Action Zone, which is now complete, as well as the Springs and the development partner procurement and community engagement that's underway. So that's activity that, you know, will continue certainly on the Springs for a number of years into the future once we get the development partner on board. There's the refurbishment of Glossop Halls. We've got monitoring town centre occupancy. So annually we do a town centre audit of our main towns in terms of what businesses are vacant and occupied, which produces town centre vacancy numbers, which then gets submitted to as part of a national data set, if you like, so we can compare our towns to others against national averages, etc. We're also, through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, have had a variety of different grants for high streets and public realm improvements, and also working closely with our colleagues at county to make sure that for things like, for example, the Springs in Buxton, and knowing that county has some active travel money, making sure that we don't duplicate and we don't leave gaps, but actually how we can maximise those funding pots to make sure they've got the widest reach and impact. And obviously we'll do that elsewhere as well, but Buxton being an example where we know the county have got some pots of money and we have the big regeneration project, and making sure that that activity complements each other as we move forward. Now, things in turn to look at for the future, and we're exploring footfall and how we can get really good data for our towns. We do have some footfall monitors within the Springs itself and along Spring Gardens, both of which are linked to the funding that we have to be able to demonstrate footfall as part of the funding that we've had for both the HAS and the High Street Fund. But we're actually looking at whether we could fund some wider town footfall analysis beyond obviously Buxton and into the other main towns. on a kind of data analysis basis that we could hopefully fund, certainly for the initial year, through UK Shared Prosperity funding. And again, that would, because on the new KPIs, we've got a footfall count in there as instead of to replace some of the historic KPIs. So that's something that we're currently exploring, and some of the data that you can get will be able to be backdated as well. We're just exploring different providers with that. And we'd be able to define the town centre geography, and it would be able to tell us not just how many people were in the town, but also how far they've travelled, how long they've stayed. So it really is more meaningful in terms of understanding the impact on the town centre and how long people have spent there in the places that they're actually interacting with and visiting. And then other things that we would look at in terms of town centres and high streets would be exploring meanwhile use for town centre vacancies. So as an example, for those of you who've been in Buxton for the last few weeks, has been the former track and trail has been heavily used during the international festival, and feedback from partners who've used that space has been exceptionally positive and very appreciative of that. So again, that can have a real positive impact in terms of, you know, bringing people into the town and providing space, useful space, even for a short period of time. There was a couple of months ago talk about and some documentation shared about potential for, it was referred to as high street auction, which was effectively about looking at long-term empty shops that were in poor condition and the potential to try and purchase those back. Again, and we've put this on there because we'll see what happens in terms of any new initiatives that the new government bring in, but that may be something that we could look at in the future, depending on the parameters of that type of funding. And then obviously something that we've talked about a lot is the springs, and the fact that, you know, over the next few months we'll get much closer to getting a development partner on board that will, as part of that development, will include office accommodation and committee meeting space within that redevelopment. And then I think we've got a couple more slides around I mentioned planning and development of the local plan. So in terms of the regeneration team, we are a consultee for planning applications. So we often will provide responses and views in terms of a planning application and an economic assessment of the impact of that planning application. So whether it's housing or a business opportunity, we have a methodology that would look at what the economic impact of, you know, X number of houses would be, and we would make those comments as a team on planning applications to help our planning colleagues in determining those applications. We also, as a team, provide information and data around housing need and demand for the housing applications. So specifically when it comes to affordable housing provision, that we're looking at what property sizes it, for example, would meet a social housing need, and the number of people on the housing register, and what the highest need in terms of housing accommodation would be, in influencing through that early stage of the planning process and trying to maximise the amount of affordable housing that we secure. And then we also are leading on a delivery of a residential development on a number of council-owned sites that have been allocated for housing. So we will be central to moving those sites forward. And then in terms of actions moving forward, we as a Regen team, will be part of the local plan working group. I believe there've been a couple of meetings already, but we're keen to keep abreast of a lot of the detail as it develops. We do and will continue to work closely with planning colleagues on strategic and complex sites from an allocations and delivery perspective. So working with them, currently talking to them about sites that haven't come forward or haven't been delivered, and supporting them on some of those reviews. And within here, we've also included the timeline for the local plan moving forward. So there's a timeline that has been provided by planning colleagues here. So again, we'll continue to work with them and support that activity. So it's important that we keep abreast of that as it develops. So in terms of the growth strategy, and as we start to revise and review and relaunch it, we've looked at, obviously, that we started off looking at the borough plan and what that basically sets the strategic aims and objectives around that growth, jobs, thriving town centres, etc. And then the growth strategy would sit below that, and be more of a vision, a strategic document, but a vision for delivering a strong economy that would benefit our residents and communities. So kind of very much a mission statement and our ambition for growth, and stating, you know, what that ambition for growth is in terms of like some of those themes we've talked about: business, jobs and skills, tourism, town centres. And then the local plan, that again is under review, but with quite a longer timescale attached to it, is very much more about the policies and proposals for development and the use of land. So effectively making sure that the land that gets allocated for employment and housing through that local plan process reflects the aims in the borough plan and the aims and vision set out in the growth strategy. So effectively that the local plan would be developed with the borough plan and the growth strategy in mind, and making sure that that narrative around growth that's set out within the borough plan continues, and that golden thread follows through into the growth strategy and then into the local plan. And then it's very likely that what we would then follow up with after the growth strategy and then the local plan are completed will potentially be a delivery plan, and looking at implementation of some of those key strategic sites, so that we really are developing that pipeline, etc., of sites, and looking at where we may need further intervention or investment to bring some of those sites forward. And we would look as well, you know, to MCA and other funding streams to make sure that we were maximising funding to support kind of development of sites, like we did with the Brownfield Land Release Fund earlier this year that we applied for, which was through One Public Estate, looking at similar opportunities which will inevitably come through MCA when it's more established. So that's just to set out some of the process as we move forward over the next few months with the growth strategy, and then slightly longer time frame on the local plan. And then I think it's on to questions again, Chair. So I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody. And hopefully I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Great presentation again, Lorraine. Thank you. Jill, do you want to come in? Councillor Scott, and then I'll bring Councillor Sizeland in.
Keep disappearing. Thanks, Chair. Thanks again, Lorraine, for that. It's really interesting. Got a couple of questions about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. I know that one of your actions is to do an analysis of it, but do you think it's been quite successful? Has the take-up of local businesses been good? Have we actually you know, kind of have a lot of local businesses used it and benefited from it, do you think, without giving the kind of proper analysis that you're going to do later?
Yes, I haven't got the figures to hand, but we had, was it last week? We've only just had a UK Shared Prosperity Fund board in the last week or 10 days or so. And certainly through that, not, you know, from a business point of view, but generally, because there are different strands to the investment, some of which was very community focused as well. Certainly we are, in terms of committed spend, we're doing really well, and after that board meeting there will have been more spend committed, because we were through that board seeking approval for a number of projects, grant funding for both businesses and community-based activity. So we have got that data in terms of, you know, how much has been committed to date, and certainly it has been well promoted and shared, and some, you know, a lot of that is down to yourselves for cascading that information, and businesses coming forward and getting the support to complete application forms, etc., and put in funding requests. And we will, again, happy to do case studies again in a future presentation on the Shared Prosperity Fund to show some of the impact of what we've achieved, as well as evaluation that will happen later on as part of the end of the programme, which is the same for all of the other different funding streams that we have, where we have to do some kind of wider evaluation.
Yeah, thanks. Because I don't know if it's just because Hayfield is so small, and you know there were certain criteria attached to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund that made it quite difficult, but it has been quite problematic, because, for example, there was one that was about improving accessibility to businesses, and our local chemist, and I know your colleagues worked really hard on this, but our local chemist wanted to kind of have an enlarged door and a ramp so wheelchairs could get in, and they couldn't get any funding because they didn't quite fit the criteria. And also, it's going back to what Paige was saying about local makers. Some of our businesses are probably micro businesses. So I think for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, you needed to apply for, I think, £2,000. And one of our local businesses only wanted 600, which was a big amount for her, but wasn't enough. And also, you've got to pay the money up front first before you get 80% back. So it's quite difficult for certain types of businesses. So I don't know if the next kind of tranche of funding is going to be slightly different and aimed at perhaps some of our single person micro businesses, because you know there were quite a lot of people who weren't able to access it. Certainly in Hayfield, it might not be the picture across the whole High Peak. But one thing that worked really well is the support from the East Midlands Chamber and the Accelerator programme. Yeah. So I don't know if that will continue. So kind of a few things really there. The fact that it is quite problematic for certain businesses, and will it change in its criteria or format?
Well, that will remain to be seen, because obviously the current tranche of funding will run out has to be spent by 2025. In terms of what happens in the future, I've no doubt it will continue in some form, but I think there's a potential, if not likelihood, that would be administered through the Mayoral Combined Authority. So slightly differently to how, you know, we got the money this last year directly to us as a council, pursuant to an investment plan that was endorsed by government. How that would work under a Mayoral Combined Authority, if that is the route we would receive the money through, you know, remains to be seen really over the coming months and quarters. So we'll have to see how that works. But I think you're right in terms of what we need to feed back to them is making sure that there is opportunities for micro businesses and rural businesses, because obviously as part of the EMCA geography, you know, it's quite a large geography, quite a large patch, and we want to make sure that the specific needs of our businesses will be met through any sort of funding that exists in the future. So it's important that we understand any of those challenges and barriers that our businesses have had to make sure that we can try and influence the types of opportunities that come forward in the future.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Okay, Kath and then Paige, please.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult, isn't it, with the growth strategy and employment and all that, because we haven't got the actual employment land in the High Peak. So much of the employment land that was in the High Peak has now got houses on it. So the knock-on effect of this is that our young, especially, I mean, a lot of people are working out of the High Peak, and especially our young people are moving out of the High Peak. Chapel has now got more older people than younger people living here, which obviously isn't sustainable. So I just don't know how we can retain younger people working here on, you know, the higher qualified they get, the more chance they are likely to move out the area. And I don't know what we can do about that.
I think these are the challenges that lots of places are experiencing, and we need to look at sometimes I think some activity and employment activity can be quite land hungry in terms of needing quite large sites, but it, you know, some more knowledge based activity maybe doesn't require such large sites. So I think some of that's looking at what are the areas of expansion in terms of sectors that would work for our geography and for our kind of unique circumstances, as you say, where we do have challenges in terms of the scale of land opportunities, whether it's for housing or for employment, and it's trying to make sure that we get the right balance to be able to be able to meet the needs from a kind of business and employment perspective, as well as the right housing to accommodate our current and future residents, and to retain those residents and not lose them to elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Paige.
Hi, I just wondered whether there was a common strategy in place for making sure that eligible businesses know about shared prosperity funding that they might want to take up. Sorry.
Yeah, so there's lots of different routes. We've got various different organisations working with us who reach out to businesses. We also have, I think Ed mentioned earlier about the businesses signing up to the newsletter. So we always encourage businesses that we interact with to sign up for our business newsletter, because through that we promote all different funding opportunities that we're aware of, not just ones that the council's offering, but actually things of a regional and national. We would share that within that activity. So it's really important. And I think Damien or somebody shared the link, or was it Ed, to the business where people can sign up for the business newsletter. We do encourage all the businesses that we're interacting with to do that. So I think we try and cascade that information. And again, we did, if you remember back, we did leaflets that councillors could distribute as well, that had I think a QR code to our website, so that could be circulated so that people would know, and you could share them when you're doing your kind of walking rounds to let businesses know to have a look. So I think that kind of activity, and also, you know, through the council's social media routes. So there's lots of different ways. We try that multi-pronged approach to make sure that we reach as many businesses as we can, as well as through kind of networks, chamber of commerce and things like that. So we do our best, but yeah, It's just about spreading the
thank you.
message. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gwynn and then Councillor Claff.
Hi, thanks, Ed. I was just thinking in terms of regeneration of certain areas. Do we actively contact and talk to owners of properties, for example, like the Buckingham Hotel, which has been empty for a long time in Buxton? There are other big buildings that aren't being used at the moment. Do we actually try to contact owners, asking what they're doing, trying to push them into either renovating and using them as hotels or changing them to residential use? And is there a possibility that we might do that?
We promote opportunities. We do. I think we've tried that in some instances to reach out to places where there've been a particular concern in terms of being empty or run down. Sometimes I think it's fair to say if they're in private ownership and the owners aren't willing to engage, it can be quite problematic because we can't force them to try and access the money, and often our opportunities for intervention can be quite limited from a kind of enforcement point of view, which wouldn't necessarily sit with Regen, but we'd work with other teams and services if properties were in such a poor condition that we'd need to look at them, from either a health and safety point of view, or there's routes to compulsory purchase order. That's why I'd specifically mention these high street auction opportunities, because that may be something that could be explored in the future, where I think there was going to be pots of money that you could apply for as a local authority to try and acquire a building but we would have to meet certain criteria. Again, and that would be around usually that it would class as a long-term empty property, which usually is either a minimum of 6 or 12 months empty. And again, it would have to potentially, again, it would be a lengthy process, particularly if it was going down an acquisition route. So we'll always explore those opportunities as a team as new kind of funding streams and different schemes and programs come to the fore. So we'll definitely happy to consider any situations or issues like that are causing an issue or an eyesore locally, and look at how we might be able to tackle them collectively, whether it's through Regen or other services. We're happy to be a conduit to that.
Great,
Okay, I mean, it just seems that we've got buildings that could be used and they're not. So, and there are buildings that have been empty for a considerable amount of time. So, it might be worth sort of having a list of those and seeing what we can do with them.
Yeah, and we can always, write to building owners and let them know that there is funding available, whether it's through UK Shared Prosperity or others, because often I think what we find with some of these properties is that the owners aren't necessarily local, and therefore they wouldn't necessarily be picking up on the social media activity and things that we're sharing locally about these funding opportunities, so they might not be aware of them. And often they sit on a building to develop at some point in the future. But absolutely, we can try and make inroads into contacting them, at least making them aware that there's funding available. And to come and speak to us.
So would you think it would be a good idea for councillors to make you aware of those if they exist in their wards?
If there are any, we're happy to look at and explore, particularly if, I'm not sure about whether this high street auction opportunity will continue, because it was something that was announced probably only about 6 months ago under the Conservative government, and whether it will continue as we have a new government and they're looking at new initiatives. But certainly if there is a list that we can keep and then look at matching it to opportunities that come up, then we're certainly happy to do that. I think Anthony might have a comment on this particular one.
Chair, just on this particular point, I know there's been a couple of trial schemes that are sort of being tried. They've been tried, but again, we don't know yet. There's been no indication from the new government as to whether it's likely to be a scheme that will be carried on with, because it only reached the point of being a couple of trials, and I'm not completely sure. The last bit I read was they had a couple of places identified, but I'm not completely sure whether the trials started before the general election. So it's possible that they may well not even go beyond the trial sort of stage. Thanks.
Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Clapp, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, thank you. Lorraine, do you have any feel for how many High Peak residents work outside High Peak in relation to the total working population, and any feel for where those people work?
Yes.
I mean, geographically, I don't mean what firms they work for.
No, we do. The data is has been a little bit out of date. So we did have some data, I think it was from about 4 or 5 years ago. I've had a look on the ONS, not the ONS, the census information, but it doesn't provide that level of granular detail. But we do have some data which showed how many commuters were out. I'm not sure if I've got it to hand though, but it was something like, I think, was it about a third were commuting out, and predominantly to the Greater Manchester. I think the challenge is that some of that data may well have been pre-COVID. There were questions, if you remember, in the census that asked you whether you worked from home or worked in an office, and I think it also asked for information about how far you travelled, but it didn't necessarily ask you to put where you travelled to. So usually what we've been looking at as well and researching is, I think we need to look at some of that data, but it is predominantly to the Greater Manchester Tameside area. There's very little data which shows anything going, or very little going towards Sheffield and Chesterfield. It is predominantly on the Greater Manchester side. But I think, yeah, the data, I've no doubt, will have changed probably quite significantly over the last few years as things have settled down post-COVID, and people's sort of patterns have got more stabilised in terms of how often they're in the office. But generally, they may well be being employed in Manchester, but might only be in the travelling across like a couple of days a week, whereas before COVID, they may well have been doing that, 5 days a week.
Yeah, I was thinking more about employment rather than commuting to the office, the figures for that, which you've explained. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so Damien, I knew I'd seen it in the growth strategy. Damien had said in the 2017 growth strategy, it said 17,000 residents out commute from the High Peak, predominantly to Greater Manchester and Cheshire.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anyone else got any comments on the presentation? Okay, so I am going to move us to the next agenda item. Have we any questions for the executive members?
No questions.
Okay, so I'm going to move us to exclusion of press and public. Rachel, can you end the recording for us so we can move into part 2, please?